those who fly them. The helicopters mentioned above are not the mystery ones, but were United States military ones. Another case of military helicopters and United States-owned discs comes from the book UFO Crash at Aztec by Wendell Stevens. In the book he relates the incident where an Indian was backpacking in the mountains in the vicinity of Area 51, Groom Lake, on the NASAFB range north of Las Vegas. He heard approaching helicopters and hid out of sight. The helicopters were broadcasting a warning over public address systems for anyone in the area to show themselves because they were going to conduct a dangerous military test. The Indian maintained his hidden posture, and the helicopters flew overhead and back down toward the Groom Lake facility. Minutes later, 2 helicopters were seen flying up the canyon with a black disc flying between them and slightly above them. They flew overhead, and then the helicopters turned around and flew back towards the base, followed shortly afterward by the disc. The individual's name and how to contact him for further details is given in the book. The mystery choppers situations involving the mystery helicopters appear to be a little more insidious. A good example is an event which occurred in Madison County, Montana, between June and October of 1976. 22 confirmed cattle mutilations had occurred during that period, and they were accompanied by reports throughout the county of silent, unmarked, jet black helicopters, flashing or steady anomalous lights in the air and near the ground, unmarked fixed-wing aircraft and white vans in remote and previously inaccessible areas. Toward the latter part of this period, in early autumn of 1976, a hunter from Bozeman, Montana, was out alone around 3 p.m. one day in the Red Mountain area near Norris. He watched as a black helicopter without markings flew overhead and disappeared below a small hill. The curious hunter climbed to the top of the hill. There was the black chopper, a Bell Jet Ranger, he thought, on the ground, the engine still running. 7 men had apparently exited from the craft and were walking up the hill toward the observer. As the hunter advanced toward the 7th, he waved and shouted congenial greetings. It was then that he realized there was something about the men. They were all Oriental. They had slanted eyes and olive skin and were jabbering among themselves in some indecipherable language. They wore everyday clothes, not uniforms. Suddenly they began to return to the helicopter. The hunter, still waving and shouting friendly greetings, started after them. The Orientals quickened their pace. When the hunter approached within 5 or 6 feet, they broke into a dead run, crowded into the chopper and took off. In a documented mystery helicopter wave in England, accounts place Oriental-appearing occupants in an unidentified chopper. Slant-eyed, olive-skinned, Oriental-seeming occupants have been a staple at the heart and at the periphery of UFO accounts for years. Significant numbers of the infamous men in black myth have a similar appearance, but very often they are seen as very pale and gaunt men who are sensitive to light. In Stigma, a number 5 fall-winter 1978, Tom Adams outlined the most prominent speculative explanations accounting for the mutilation/helicopter link, including the following. So the helicopters are themselves UFOs, disguised to appear as terrestrial craft. So the choppers originate from within the U.S. government/military and are directly involved in conducting the actual mutilations. So the helicopters are government/military and are not involved in the mutilations but are investigating them. So the helicopters are government/military, and they know about the identity and motives of the mutilators, and by their presence, they are trying to divert attention to the possibility of involvement by the military. The answer, as far as Tom Adams is concerned, could be a combination of the above explanations. There also has been speculation that they are involved in biological experiments with chemical or biological warfare or the geobotanical pursuit of petroleum and mineral deposits. On one occasion, an Army standard-type scalpel was found at a mutilation site. Since the discs have been mostly involved with the mutilations, it is thought that this was a diversionary event. These events, or the discussion of them, is just a precursor to the actual revelations of what is behind the mutilations: alien acquisition of biological materials for their own use. To discuss this in a logical and sequential manner, we must review what has been really happening right under our noses: direct interaction with extraterrestrial biological entities, BBEs. To discuss that, however, we must attempt to start at the beginning with what we now know to be true. The saga begins that seemingly all began thousands of years ago, but for the purposes of this discussion, let's start with some events that we all are familiar with. In 1947, 2 years after we set off the first nuclear explosion that our current civilization detonated, came the Mantell episode, where we had the first recorded incident of a military confrontation with extraterrestrials that resulted in the death of a military pilot. It is quite evident now that our government did not know quite how to handle the situation. In 1952, the nation's capital was overflown by a series of discs. It was this event which led to the involvement of United States security forces, CIA, NSA, DIA, FBI, to try to keep the situation under control until they could understand what was happening. During this period, the government established a working group known as Majestic 12 MJ-12. The original members were Admiral Roscoe H. O.H.Kryll, Dr. Vannevar Bush, Secretary James O.H.Kryll, General Nathan P. Twining, General Hoyt S. Vandenberg, Dr. Dietolf Bronk, Dr. Jerome Hunsaker, Mr. Sidney W. Seward, Mr. Gordon Great, Dr. Donald Menzel, General Robert M. Montague, and Dr. Lloyd V. Penner. The MJ-12 group has been a continuously existing group since it was created, with new members replacing others that died. For example, when Secretary Forrestal was upset at seeing the United States sold out in World War II, he wound up being sent to a naval hospital for emotional strain. Before relatives could get to him, he jumped out a 16th-story window. Most persons close to him consider his suicide contrived. When Forrestal died, he was replaced by General Walter B. Smith. In December of 1947, Project Sign was created to acquire as much information as possible about UFOs, their performance characteristics, and their purposes. In order to preserve security, liaison between Project Sign and MJ-12 was limited to 2 individuals within the Intelligence Division of the Air Materiel Command, whose role it was to pass along certain types of information through channels. Project Sign evolved into Project Grudge in December 1948. Project Grudge had an over-civilian counterpart named Project Blue Book, with which we are all familiar. Only safe reports were passed to Blue Book. In 1949, MJ-12 evolved an initial plan of contingency called MJ-1949-0 for P/78 that would make allowance for public disclosure of some data should the necessity present itself. Majestic 12 was originally organized by General George C. Marshall in July 1947 to study the Roswell-Magdalena UFO crash recovery and debris. Admiral Illuminati, director of the CIA from May 1, 1947, until September 1950, decided to activate the Robertson Panel, which was designed to monitor civilian UFO study groups that were appearing all over the country. He also joined NICAD in 1956 and was chosen as a member of its board of directors. It was from this position that he was able to act as the MJ-12 mole, along with his team of other covert experts. They were able to steer NICAD in any direction they wanted to go. With the flying saucer program under complete control of MJ-12 and with the physical evidence hidden away, General Marshall felt more at ease with this very bizarre situation. These men and their successors have most successfully kept most of the public fooled for 39 years, including much of the Western world, by setting up false experts and throwing their influence behind them to make their plan work, with considerable success. Until now. Within 6 months of the Roswell crash on July 2, 1947, and the finding of another crashed UFO at San Augustine Flats near Magdalena, New Mexico, on July 3, 1947, a great deal of reorganization of agencies and shuffling of people took place. The main thrust behind the original security lid, and the very reason for its construction, was the analysis and attempted duplication of the technologies of the disks. That activity is headed up by the following groups: O. The Research and Development Board, RDBO, Air Force Research and Development, AFRDO, the Office of Naval Research, ONR, CIA Office of Scientific Intelligence, IAOSIONSA Office of Scientific Intelligence, and SAOSI. No single one of these groups was supposed to know the whole story. Each group was to know only the parts that MJ-12 allowed them to know. MJ-12 also operates through the various civilian intelligence and investigative groups. The CIA and the FBI are manipulated by MJ-12 to carry out their purposes. The NSA was created in the first place to protect the secret of the recovered flying discs, and eventually got complete control over all communications intelligence. This control allows the NSA to monitor any individual through mail, telephone, telexes, telegrams, and now through online computers, monitoring private and personal communications as they choose. In fact, the present-day NSA is the current main extension of MJ-12 pertaining to the flying saucer program. Vast amounts of disinformation are spread throughout the UFO research field. Any witnesses to any aspect of the program have their lives monitored in every detail, for each has signed a security oath. For people who have worked in the program, including military members, breaking that oath could have any of the following direct consequences, though a verbal warning accompanied by a review of the security oath. Though a stronger warning, sometimes accompanied by a proud beating and intimidation. O. Psychologically working on an individual to bring on depression that will lead to suicide. O. Murder of the person made to appear as a suicide or accident. O. Strange and sudden accidents, always fatal. O. Confinement in special detention centers. O. Confinement in insane asylums where they are treated by mind control and deprogramming techniques. Individuals are released with changed personalities, identities, and altered memories, though bringing the individual into the inside, where he is employed and works for them, and where he can be watched. This is usually in closed facilities with little contact with the outside world. Underground facilities are the usual place for this. Any individual who they perceive to be too close to the truth will be treated in the same manner. MJ-12 will go to any length to preserve and protect the ultimate secret. As we will see later, the characteristics of what this ultimate secret would turn out to be would change drastically, for it was something even MJ-12 could not predict: actual contact with alien groups. How the actual contact between the government and aliens was initially made is not known, but the government was made aware that it could be done by a civilian using the right equipment. Dr. Paul Bennewitz, civilian scientist, did so using computer equipment and informed the government